Okay, let's go. As I said, I'm going to paint a few miniatures by pencil art for my upcoming diorama today, or I will start painting them, and I guess we have to see how far we got. I just primed them using Mr. Leveling Thinner and Mr. Surfacer 1500 in black. They're still a bit glossy, but that's fine. Um, I prepared three of them. There will be five guys in the next diorama, but I only got to build those guys. And like the last time, I'm a bit late today since I forgot those guys weren't primed yet, and I had to do a quick priming session just before the stream started. And again, thank you so much for 3,000 subscribers. When I woke up today and saw this, I was quite excited about that. I never thought that this YouTube channel would start off so fast, and I quite enjoy it so far. It's a lot of fun to get to interact with you guys and reading all the positive comments and stuff like that. As I told you in my community posts, and my Patreon members know this as well, Currently, I'm working on a German Hummel self-propelled artillery vehicle. The idea was to finish this until next weekend for the Euro Model Expo in Lingen in Germany. But unfortunately, I got quite sick in the last week. And I have a whole bunch of problems with the kit and the sheer amount of photo etch parts I got for it. So it will take me a little more time to finish that. Um, Unfortunately, it won't be ready for the expo. But that's not too bad. I guess I already finished building the model mostly. There are a few parts left I still have to do, and when those are finished, the video will be out. So you can watch that already, and then I will continue working on the diorama and of course on the paint job for the model. So let's start up with this guy. The kits I got from Panzer Art are kits for German tank crew personnel. That's not, or it's a bit of an issue, but it's not that big of an issue. So in the German self-propelled artillery, as far as I know, they used the same uniforms, but they were in black. They were in the normal field gray version, and as you might know, those are either black or black, greenish or grayish. And I've got an AK Interactive color set for that I like to use for German uniforms. And since this guy will be sitting on the ground in the grass, I will give him the more gray version of the uniform. As you can see, I don't like to do a zenithal prime. Sometimes I do it to get a better view and a better idea of where shadows and highlights will be. But for those miniatures, it's not that necessary since all the folds on the closes are quite pronounced, and it's easy to see those without a zenithal prime. But as I said, I'm not the biggest fan of doing a zenithal prime and then glazing the colors over. I did this for the 1/72 scale figures for the Leopard video I just uploaded a few weeks ago. And I have to say it worked quite great in the small scale, but for the bigger figures, I like to use classic layering approach and layer my colors in a lot of thin layers. It might take a little more time, but I quite enjoy that, and it's not that big of a deal. So I start out with my AK Interactive German Gray and start to base coat the whole figure in the German Gray. As you might know, black as a primer is quite a great idea because you get some nice dark shadows. I always use kind of a dark color as my primer. Normally it's black or brown. In this case, it's the black. And I start doing a couple of thin layers all over the uniform to get the gray look established. And then I start working out the shadows and highlights. It's a lot of back and forth for me normally, but that's just the way I like to work. Sometime I guess I have to try to use the glazing approach on a 1/35 scale figure, but so far I'm quite happy with the results I get from my layering approach. And of course, if you have any question regarding my painting process, my models whatsoever, post them in the chat and I will make sure to get back to you. I use mostly Panzer Art miniatures for my models, for my dioramas. I really like the look of those. Unfortunately, sometimes I'm a bit disappointed by the quality, so they are mostly great. It's not that big of an issue. Um, but it's common with resin miniatures to get sometimes tiny air bubbles from the manufacturing process, and This time I had quite a lot of bubbles I had to fill in with super glue and stuff. And resin isn't the easiest material to work with in that regard, at least in my opinion. For a plastic miniature, it's quite easy to use sprue glue or stuff like that, but that won't work on resin, so I normally use my black super glue. And it takes quite a while to get them all filled in. Sometimes you have to drill them out to make them a bit bigger, and then you can start filling them in. But that's yeah, kind of it's a lot of work when those air bubbles are in unpleasant spots like directly on a fold or on a seam line on the clothes and stuff. Funnily enough, the figures I haven't built yet, that's this set here, they are great. So I didn't had to hadn't to do there wasn't a lot of cleanup to do on them. Um, but those guys I just showed you a couple of minutes ago needed a lot of work, unfortunately. There will also be a dog. Um, so in one of these sets that a dog was included. And I'm quite sure that I will use him on the diorama. Um, Unfortunately, we won't paint this guy today. I wanted to paint him today, but I broke his tail, so I have to repair that before I do any painting work on this guy. And as you might have noticed, I also upgraded my live streaming setup a bit. Last time there were some issues with the viewing angle for the miniature, but I had the option to upgrade to an overhead rig, and now everything's hanging from the ceiling, my lights and my camera, and it's a lot better to film those painting scenes. Since a lot of you guys asked about a painting video, and that will come after this big project is finished, I decided I have to find another option to film the painting process for my miniatures. Also, sometimes when I start painting those minis, I start to notice a few more imperfections. Um, guess you know the feeling when you think you can start painting and everything looks all right, and then you notice, oh no, there's a rough spot and there's a rough spot and stuff like that. So I might have to fix a few more issues here, but so far I guess I was able to get all the mold lines and stuff. As far as I know, Panzer Art normally 3D prints their miniatures and then casts them in resin. And I'm not really sure why they don't just 3D print all of them and then sell them. I guess this would be possible, but maybe it's just easier this way. As you can see, a lot of thin layers of paint to this moment, and I base coat more or less everything, even the darkest shadows that will be black in the end. And when I start doing the highlights and the shadows, I might go back in with the black paint to get some darker shadows if I feel like I need those. Normally, my most important tool for painting figures is the hair dryer, so I'm a little faster. we'll spare you this in this live stream, so you don't have to listen to my hairdryer too much, and we just wait for the paint to dry. But in those thin layers, that's quite fast normally. So yes, that's the base coat for this guy. And I will switch now to, let me see how it's called, Extra Dark Green by AK Interactive. It's this paint for one of the other guys. And I will start doing the base coat on him as well. And this guy, let me get it in focus. He's wearing an overall, and as far as I know, those normally wear in a camouflage scheme. And I think I will do the Splittermuster. Maybe we start this today as well, but I'm not sure yet which paints I will use. I also have an AK Interactive paint set for that. I really like their third generation paint range. They're most likely the best paints I've ever used. And I have the Splittermuster base coat for him as well, but I'm not sure what to use as a shadow color yet. Highlighting it isn't that big of a deal, but for the shadow color, I'm not too sure at this point. But maybe we'll figure it out in this live stream. So let's start working on this guy as well. Now it's in focus. And I will use the extra dark green as a base coat for his uniform as well. I often like to switch up the colors, like so there are two versions of this uniform in the AK Interactive paint set. One is the more gray version and one is the more green version. And I often like to do the pants in one color and the uniform jacket in another, just to get some variation. But for those guys, I will paint one completely green uniform, one completely gray uniform, and then I will do some switching of the colors on the other guys I haven't built yet. If I'm able to finish those guys until next week, I also will bring them with me to the Euro Model Expo. If you're there, say hi and take a look at them. Yes, I'm planning to do some modern armor as well. I just did the Leopard in 1 to 72nd scale. If you haven't watched that, go give it a look. I think it turned out quite nice, and I did a nice small diorama for that. And I'm not sure yet what will be the next bigger project after the Hummel is finished. But I would enjoy doing some modern armor. So if you have any suggestions for that, let me know, and maybe that's something I might be interested in. There's like one vehicle I really like. It's a rocket launcher. It's the in the German army it's called Mars. Um, that's a vehicle I really enjoy looking at. I'm not sure if it counts as modern, so it's as far as I know, it's still in use, but it's like from the 70s or 80s or something like that. So if you will be there on Saturday, then you have the chance to see the Leopard. I will bring this with me. And of course, I will also bring the ready for transport diorama with the FW190. But that will be entered in the contest, I guess. Let's see how the judges like it. I'm quite excited. It will be my first modeling show. Um, I haven't been to one, so I don't really know how the competition will be and where my models are placed skill-wise. Yeah, the Puma is a pretty cool vehicle. Um, it's also for sure on my list. And I just watched the night shift video on the Ryefield Puma a couple of weeks ago. I watched it when it came out, but I rewatched it. and I think he had quite a hard time with all the foliage parts on that model as well. But yeah, Puma might also be a nice idea. There's one in the German tank museum as well, and that's like a prototype version. Maybe I have to do something like that. I also thought about the German Marder. Um, it's also a Schützenpanzer or infantry fighting vehicle. That's something I would enjoy because it's a model I can remember I did as a kid. So I did some modeling as a kid, mostly Revell kits or only Revell kits, since those are very readily sorry, readily available here in Germany in toy stores. But back then it was a challenge to get those things built up as fast as possible, and then you took one or three cans of this horrible Revell emaille paint and slopped it on there. Paint was still wet after 3 days because it was so thick. But since you wanted to play with the tank, I quite rushed that process back then. But I can still remember that I did a Marder. I think it had to be 1 to 72nd scale, and transport tank the Fuchs as well. Yeah, will be for sure on the lookout for my next kit at the EME. I think there will be quite a bunch of shops. As far as I know, Modellbau König from Germany will be there. They are they are quite big. They just announced an Leopard 2A7 something, I guess, in 1 to 16th scale. And for a brief moment, I thought about building that one as well, but I just did the small Leopard, and I guess I'm not that interested in 1 to 16th scale since it's quite large. I did build their Puma in 1 to 16 scale when it came out, but not like the German the modern German vehicle, but the old vehicle, the um, reconnaissance tank on wheels. And I didn't get around to paint it yet because I was a bit disappointed in the detail level of the 1 to 16 scale kit. Wasn't really more detailed than the 1 to 35th scale, and that was something that disappointed me a bit, I have to say. But for everyone else as well, so if you have any suggestions what I should build in the future, let me know here in the chat or via email or on Patreon or in the comment. I read those all, and maybe I can write it on my list for models I want to build. There's a lot of stuff on this list, but it takes me takes me so much time to finish one project. So it's always quite hard to decide what I should work on next. But I have to say, since I started this YouTube channel, it's a lot easier for me to get stuff done because I know you guys are waiting for the video, and it like forces me to finish one project before I start another one. I haven't looked at the M3 yet, but yeah, I looked at the Leopard. I hope it will be in Lingen as well, so we can see the pre-production version there that they already showed at the Spielwarenmesse in Nürnberg. quite excited for that. But I think it's a bit too large for my taste. Modern tanks and Windows 16s are like just just huge, I guess. Also, for a brief moment, I thought about the Tamiya one. I think they are releasing one as well that can build into an RC tank. And for a couple of seconds, I was really interested in the idea of building an RC tank. But honestly, if I would do that, I would like to put the same effort into it like I would do in any other in a 1/35th scale model or something like that. And after you did that, I think it's not the best idea to drive it around somewhere outside or even inside. So yeah, I guess we will give him a couple of minutes to dry and take a look at the other guy yet. Back again. There's like a weird spot on his leg here. Oh, that's just missing paint. So I thought I missed a mold line or something like that. But at this point he looks quite nice. There's a bit of a gap on his arm, but I think that won't be too bad. Maybe I have to write the Pensa Art guys an email and ask them why they just don't 3D print all their figures, so we don't have to do any assembly. Would be a bit faster, I guess. And when I started this stream, I just pinned a comment in the chat as a thank you for you guys for the 3,000 subscribers. I just set up a Patreon discount, so if you like, check it out. I post a lot of in progress updates over on Patreon, and you get early video releases and a lot of cool stuff. One thing that just came up with Patreon, if you would like to subscribe to my Patreon, don't use your iPhone or the iOS app for that, since I just figured out that Apple started to put a very hefty fee on there, and it's a lot more expensive when you're using the iOS app than using just your browser on your computer or the Android version of the app. So yeah, as you can see, nothing too complicated yet, just putting down the base coat overall. Like to start by painting the uniform, and then I will do the other stuff later. And before I start painting any of the details like his belt or his hands, his shoes and stuff like that, I will go back in with the black paint and base coat this black as well, since I like to have that dark base coat to start from. But I will do this by hand then, using my scale 75 artist acrylics for that. The black paint is quite great for doing a quick base coat by hand. I think it's not as strong as the Mr. Hobby stuff that can be airbrushed on, but since those figures won't be touched when they are placed on the diorama, I'm not too concerned with a paint that's a bit weaker. So let's take a look at the green uniform again. Yeah, I'll have to do another layer for that one, I guess. Let's try out the Splittermuster paint. And it's clogged. Maybe I'm able to get an idea what will be a nice base coat for that one, or a nice shadow color for that one. Yeah, it's completely clogged. Great. Not sure when the last time was when I used this paint. So it's quite greenish, and I guess I will go with the. I could go with the extra dark green for that one. I could, maybe. No, not really. I will be back in a second, and I will take a look at my paints to find the right shadow color for this one. Chocolate from the AK Interactive range. Yeah, that looks great. So we're using chocolate AK 1113 for the base coat for the Splittermuster uniform. Let's just try this out. So as you can see, quite thin paint in this at this moment. I only use water to thin it down, and I'm using a wet palette, of course. And of course, those guys will receive a head when they're finished. What I really like is on with the Pensa art figures, um, that the head always fits in great on the miniature. So it's quite easy to paint the head separate and then glue it on afterwards. It's a lot easier for the faces. I'm not great at painting faces, and everything that makes it a bit easier is very welcome for me. So again, if you have any suggestions for models I should do in the future, let me know in the chat or in the comments. And I think I have to do some shopping next week at the Euro Model Expo. I'm quite excited to paint this Splittermuster scheme on his uniform here, on his overall. I haven't done this yet, and I'm not sure yet how I will paint the small rain marks and stripes all over. Well, I guess we will figure it out. Let me know when I start working out of frame. I Did use some tape to mark out the area on my desk where I can work in. So I'm in frame most of the time, I hope. But when I start working outside of that, let me know and then I will come back into frame. And right after I said this, I got a text message by my from my girlfriend. She watches the stream as well, saying I should try to keep it more in frame. I will do. Thank you for pointing that out. So yeah, let's give him some time to dry and go back to the green uniform. Focus. Great. I guess those base coats are something that you could do with an airbrush as well. And I sometimes do, but I don't really like to use those normal acrylic paints in my airbrush. I feel that they're like always a pain to get out from the airbrush and to get the airbrush clean again. So I'd rather paint them in using my brush. Also, coming back to the topic with the modern tanks, I'm quite interested to see if modern tanks are something that you guys are interested. I received a lot of comments after I uploaded the first Leopard video that it's cool that I did a modern tank, but compared to the videos with the FW190, those videos did a lot worse, unfortunately. And for a brief moment, I was like, yeah, okay, maybe you guys just don't like modern tanks. But since so many of you asked, will do a lot more modern stuff, I guess. Or I will also do some modern stuff. But I sometimes feel like that it's the a lot easier to get stuff for like World War II models and maybe World War One as well. And there isn't so much modern stuff, or at least there's way more World War II stuff, I guess. I also thought about building maybe a modern helicopter or a modern jet aircraft. Um, I have to say, since the FW190 was my first aircraft model, I quite enjoyed that. And I might be interested to try out building a jet or something like that. The F-35 kit by Tamiya looks quite great, I think. But on the other hand, I sometimes feel like that maybe modern aircrafts are quite boring when it comes to weathering and working on the paint job. So yeah, I guess we have finished with the green base coat as well. The gray one also looks Looks quite nice. Yeah, not too bad. Let's check in on the brown base coat here. And I think we have to do a second layer for this one. I quite enjoy painting German uniforms because of the possible variations in the uniform designs. Um, I don't fancy to paint like five exactly or more or less guys that look more or less the same. Of course, that's the that's the whole point of a uniform. But it's quite enjoyable to get some variation. And I also have a figure set from Alpine in my stash with a bunch of German figures. And they all are wearing camo uniforms. I'm looking forward for quite a time to start working on those guys, but to this day I'm not sure um, what I want to do with them when they're painted, so I haven't started yet. Also, let me know please in the chat if you would be interested in some live streams of me building a model. Maybe we can do a project that will be done in live stream only. That's a bit simpler because I guess for most subjects it's the live stream isn't the right format, I guess. But if you want to see me glue some plastic together live, let me know. So, yeah, let's give him a couple more minutes to dry and see how the other guys are looking. So the gray uniform is dry and looks nice at this point. And the green also looks great, but isn't quite dry yet. I would like to continue with the green uniform. And now after I established the dark base coat, I like to use a paint that's a lot lighter, and I like to start working on the highlights a bit, so I get a general idea of where highlights will be placed and where the shadows will be placed. I will show you my wet palette for a second. Get those out of the way. All right, so at this point, um, it's the green paint you can see here. It's the extra dark green by AK Interactive. And now I will start using some of the field gray base for the green uniform. Some spots here. Put some of the extra dark green next to it. I normally like to use, so there are three paints, and I like to use the extra dark green, and then I mix the extra dark green with the uniform base. I use the uniform base on its own, and I use the gray green for my lightest highlights, mix it with the uniform base for once, and then it's also clocked. Great. Still clocked. And then I will mix up a version of the gray green with the uniform base. Yeah, use it on its own. I like to start out by preparing those on my wet palette. But after a while, everything gets mixed together, so I can go back and forth between my paint. And of course, I also do that for the more gray version of the uniform. So I will now start using the uniform base mixed with the let's see how it's called, gray green. So it's quite a light paint, and I will start painting in some of the highlights, so I can get an idea where the shadows and the highlights will be placed, and then I will go back and forth my lighter paints and the darker ones and blend everything together. Some of the base paint isn't dry yet, but I don't care for that. I just start working in the other areas. And I like to exaggerate a few of the highlights at first, so everything is quite clear to me and clearly visible, and then I can start going back in with darker paints and stuff. Might be not the most efficient way of painting, but it's the way that works best for me. And it's also the reason why I'm not good at painting wargaming figures. I tried that in the past and I would love to do it a bit more. But since I only know about this approach and really enjoy it, it's quite hard to paint up larger amounts of miniatures for me. So yeah, I don't worry about blending too much at this point. It's no problem. I will come back in later and start blending everything together. So this is like the when I don't paint figures for my dioramas or for my models, I like to do some oil painting, and that's like the approach I use there as well, establishing the dark shadows and then the lighter spots, and um, then start blending everything together to create the midtones. It's a bit similar to do this with oil paints on canvas, since they stay wet a lot longer. Um, but with those AK Interactive third generation paints, that's also quite doable. I'm also always switching around. Sometimes I finish one area completely and then start working on the next one. And sometimes I like to do one color all over the figure. It's like if you look at him from like half a meter away, he also looks fun without any blending. It's like I often also like to take a few pictures while painting my figures and look at those, because I sometimes feel like it's way easier to spot flaws in your painting on a picture. They're a lot more visible on pictures than in reality. And I guess we all know that feeling that we paint a figure, then we take a picture of it, and in that moment we notice that it looks quite bad. Or at least it looks quite bad on a picture. All right, I'm switching now to the where is it? Field gray base German uniform, and do a bit of blending. It's quite a bit darker than the paint we just used. Just to bring a few areas a bit closer together. But I guess if you've seen a couple of my videos with miniatures in it, you know that I quite like to use pretty harsh shadows. And I like to exaggerate a little because I think it just looks better. Maybe not the most realistic, but For me, it's scale modeling is more of an art form, I guess. And I try to make something that looks cool, and I'm fine if it's not what did I want to say? If it's not too realistic. And at this point, it's a lot of back and forth between paints. Another reason why I think it's quite important to exaggerate the colors a little after I'm done painting the uniform. I also will start to do some weathering to the figures as well, add some mud and dirt to their uniforms. And like on the bigger, larger models, those weathering steps will tone down the final paint scheme a lot. So to keep the contrast high, I exaggerate that a bit, and then it will look fine still after the weathering process as well. Guess I have to try to finish those in time for the Euro Model Expo. So if you will be there, you can take a look at them and tell me how I did in the in the live stream. So at this point, I started to bring in some of the darker tones back in between his legs in the shadows, but I still try to keep the front side of the fold you can see here quite light, so it will stay visible. I think it's kind of sad to to hide all those nicely sculpted highlights in dark shadows. So I paint a few more highlights in even in the shadow, so they still will be still visible after all. So again, if you have any questions regarding my models, my YouTube channel, stuff like that, feel free to post them in the chat and I will answer them right away. Also again, at this point I haven't touched my lightest green, the pure green gray paint yet. I will use that only in the end when everything's done to add a bit of extra contrast to the model. And at this point I also use really thin paint so I can glaze in thin layers and blend everything together this way. And as I said, at this point it's a lot of back and forth between lighter and darker paints. So the next diorama for this that those guys will be placed in will also have another tree in it. A tree that's a lot bigger than those birch trees on the leopard diorama, of course. It will be an oak tree, and I have quite an interesting idea to do the leaves and stuff. And at this point in time, I started to glue them on one by one. So maybe next time we should do a live stream how I glue like a few thousand trees to an oak tree or something like that. Might not be the most interesting subject, but maybe it's cool to see me going insane live on camera. What exactly would be great? Seeing me going insane live on camera or seeing me gluing in all those small leaves? Yeah, the tree will be included for sure in the diorama video. Um, Let me get the leaves real quick and the tree. So I'm not able to fit the tree into frame here, but I can show you a few of the leaves. Um, I tried a lot of stuff out. I bought some laser cut leaves by AK Interactive and by MIG and all that stuff, and they look really great. But unfortunately they're quite expensive. So they come in a really small package and are yeah are quite expensive for that. Um, and there's also something like a leaf punch. I used that one as well, but I wasn't happy with my results that way because I wasn't able to find a paper I liked with the structure, and those leaves don't look too detailed for me. So I tried a lot of other stuff. I also tried laser cutting leaves myself, but again, I wasn't able to find the right paper for that yet. So I started to 3D print leaves. I designed a couple of oak leaves, and those are some of the prototypes. The actual finished version, they only have one support, and let me get some tweezers. It's quite easy to just pick them off. Of course, I have to paint them, but I guess I will get some green resin to print them and then paint them later. And it's that easy to pick them off of the sprue, but yeah, you have to glue them on one by one. There's something I had in mind when I started making the birch trees for the leopard diorama as well. I had the idea maybe glue on all the leaves one by one, but that would have taken way too long for those 5 trees. And in that small scale, in 1/72 scale, it wasn't that big of a deal to just sprinkle it on and look quite okay. But for something like an oak tree and oak leaves, I figured it's not the best idea to just sprinkle it over because those leaves have quite a clear direction in them. So yeah, I decided to 3D print them, and I guess I have to glue them on individually. But what I really like is they have quite a lot of detail for this tiny scale. Let me see if I can get it in focus. Nah, not really. But there are even the small parts of the leaves are pronounced and stuff like that. And yeah, they're quite easy to pick off the sprue with some tweezers, and then they can be glued on. I'm able to do like 10 to 20 leaves in 1 minute, and at this point I 3D printed about I guess 10,000 of them or something like that. So so quite a lot. It will take me quite a while. I'm printing mostly at this point on the. Let me check it real quick. So at this point, I have set up the Elegoo Mars 2 Pro, but I will get the new version as well. But honestly, the for the price point, the Mars 2 Pro is a great printer. But it's quite hard to get it since it's they're quite an old version. But I've used those for a couple of years now, and they produce quite nice results. And since most of the stuff we're working with will be painted later, I think it's not that big of a deal to have a few small layer lines. Because after a coat of primer and some paint, most of that is gone and won't be visible in the end. All right. So let's go back to his pens here. I think the most important part with 3D printing is to try a lot of stuff and figure out what your printer is capable of and what not. I noticed that as well when I did the all those small details for the ready for transport diorama, like the turnbuckles and stuff, which I used to mount the FW190 to the transport rack. I was, yeah, I did a lot of testing to get that right. And I think it's great that resin printers are now so readily available, and resin got quite cheap. I did 3D printing for like 12 years now, and when I started out, most printers were FDM printers, and you had to pay like 30 euros for a spool of filament. But nowadays everything got so cheap, so it's not that big of a deal to do a lot of testing and playing around. But of course, that's also a hobby on its own, far from being something like you can buy and just push a button and everything starts. I also started something I wanted to do for quite a while. I started building the 3D model for a complete model kit, so I can print my own model kit and then assemble that. Because a couple of months ago, I've seen quite an interesting picture from a tank and another vehicle in it. And there are model kits for that tank, but there are no model kits for the other vehicle in this picture. So I decided to try to make maybe my own model kit and just 3D print it when it's possible. But that will take quite a while. I'm not so far in that project. But when I can see my idea working out, I will start giving you some informations about that for sure. And of course, the files then will also be available on my Patreon as well. So yeah, welcome to everybody who just joined recently. I started painting a few figures for my upcoming diorama project. I think there's another YouTuber who just painted this figure as well for his, I think it was a Kübelwagen disguised as a German training tank or something like that. And he also bought the same figure set, sorry. But he did the classic black uniform for this one. While I'm doing the green one uniform version, so I can use it for the Sonderkraftfahrzeug 165, the Hummel. Let's focus a bit on the other side of his pants. I also like to keep my blends a bit rougher, so the individual paints are quite visible in the end sometimes for me. But I like to get this more painterly look on my miniatures, so you can actually see that it's a painted miniature. Also, unfortunately, I don't just have the patience to make everything completely smooth and nice. I'm not sure if I asked you this question already. If you enjoy those live streams and would like to see more of them, also let me know in the chat so we can make this maybe a regular thing every couple of weeks. I have to paint those figures anyway, so um, you also might like to join me for that. No, I'm using mostly the AK Interactive third generation paints. Let me show you a couple of those. Um, those ones, and they have different versions of it for figures and vehicles and stuff like that, but they're all the same. I do have a bunch of the Vallejo acrylics, and I think those are nice paints, but I prefer the AK ones. They feel a bit smoother than the Vallejo ones, and I also think that they are a bit easier to thin down. But it's, to be honest, it's not that big of a difference. Um, The other point that I really enjoy about the AK paints is that you get some pre-made sets and yeah, some for different uniform types and stuff like that. So for those guys, I'm using the German uniform set, and that contains, let me show you real quick, six paints. It's like for the green version of the uniform, there's the extra dark green as a shadow color, a base color, and a highlight color. And those three paints are like the perfect combination for the green uniform and for the gray version of that uniform. There's the German gray, the field gray base, and this gray blue paint, and they're like perfect for the other type of German uniform. And that's what I really enjoy. But when I started out with modeling and miniature painting, I used a bunch of Vallejo acrylics as well. But I have to say I'm a bit of an AK Interactive fanboy at this point. So I use a bunch of their stuff. So AK, if you're watching this and if you would like to sponsor me, send me an email. As you can see, the folds on those miniatures are really pronounced, and I think Panzer Art does a greater job of designing figures. But I have to say, you also get a lot of really good looking plastic figures today. I have a bunch of mini art figures, and it's a little more work to get them to build them together and to fill in all the seams and stuff like that. But they really do look great, even compared to resin miniatures. It's not like a couple of years ago when plastic figures always looked a bit wonky. Still today, older sets look a bit wonky. Again, if you notice that I'm completely out of frame, just let me know and I will come back into frame. But sometimes it's it's quite hard to get the right angle for me for painting and showing it on camera as well. So yeah, it still looks quite rough at this point. but layer by layer this will get better. Also, I'm nowhere near finished with this project and the diorama, of course. But I decided to start the figure painting at this early stage already, since I have quite a good idea how it will look in the end. And I hope that this will prevent me from rushing the figures in the end because I just want to see everything together. So I decided to start early with the figure painting so I can stretch it out over a longer time to get the best possible result. I think most of you guys who are building models as well know that feeling that at some point you get in your build you just want to finish it, and it's a bit hard to keep the focus and make everything as best as possible. I think we're getting somewhere. Slowly, we are getting somewhere. And of course, also, if you're new here, please consider subscribing to my channel. That would help me out a lot. And for all of you guys who are subscribed already, again, thank you so much for that. I was really excited when I noticed this morning that I just hit the 3,000 subscriber mark. And again, I will be at the Euro Model Expo next week in Dingen, Germany. So if you happen to be there, please say hi. And just in case, if you're a judge for the competition, please give me all the possible points for my ready for transport diorama. That would be great as well. Let's see. It took us about 1.5 hours now to get to this point. But of course, we also did the base coats already on those other guys. Maybe I have to do another layer on the brown uniform, and the gray one already looks quite good at this point. But it always amazes me how fast the time goes by when you start painting a figure and you get really into it. But I guess that's something that's true for everything done in modeling. So you start out and a couple of hours later you just notice that it's evening already or it's quite late. And then you ask yourself what you've been doing all the time since there's barely any progress. At least that's true for me most of the time. I had this feeling quite often in the last weeks when I worked on the German um, Hummel. I don't know why I pronounce it in English. The bumblebee. I will include a lot of photo etch parts on that one, and I'm not that experienced with photo etch parts, and everything just takes me so long soldering it together and stuff. Looks quite cool at this point, but sometimes I just had the feeling that I just will never finish that project. And as I said already, I had the high hopes to finish the that model for the Euro Model Expo, but no chance. The build isn't even done yet. No paint on the model so far. I did some work on the diorama. I did a resin pour for a river. That was quite exciting. I unfortunately I had to do it twice. For the first one, I used the AK interactive resin, and I poured way too much resin. It looked really, really great, and then in took like 30 seconds to go downhill from there. It looked really great, and then it started cooking, and it got really hot. I had a thermo. um, I measured the temperature, and it was like 130 degrees or something like that. So it was really hot and started bubbling. And then I had to build this river again. I ordered another resin and had to start all over with the river, unfortunately. But now it looks fine. Hope he doesn't mind painting me between his legs. And I think I will start doing a bit of work on his jacket to get a better picture how the uniform will look all together. And again, after I painted in the dark base coat, I will go in with quite a light paint and start sketching in the highlights. So I get a better picture where the lights and dark will be in the end. And then start blending everything together. It's a lot easier doing stuff like this on his pens normally, since those folds are a lot more pronounced. And my brush looks horrible by now. Also, what really helps with those pencil art figures is that they have quite nice photos on their website of the 3D models in a rendered version. And those pictures are quite nice to see the shadows and highlights. And that helps a lot. What also is a great help sometimes is when the figure is primed in black with Mr. Surfacer or something like that. Um, take a picture of that with flash on. That also helps quite a lot to see the lights and darks. And I feel like we're slowly getting somewhere with this figure. Still a lot of work to do. So welcome to everybody who just joined recently. I'm painting a few Panzer art figures in 1 to 35th scale for my upcoming diorama project. We started out by doing the base coat on 3 of the 5 figures I have planned for this diorama, but then decided to work mostly on one of them so you can see a bit more progress. So it's looking quite nice already. And as I said in the beginning, I'm not the biggest fan of the pre-shading approach and then um, doing doing a glaze with an airbrush all over. I like to start with a dark base coat or a dark primer and a dark base coat, and then a layering approach, and then of course some glazing in the end to bring everything together. I guess I have to do more figure painting in the future. It's uh, it's quite fun for me, and I'm happy that I don't have to work on the tank for those guys today. Also, I think it's fun to see something like this happening in real time to get a better feeling for how long it takes. Sometimes a bit weird for me if when I watch my own videos, um, while editing them, and sometimes it looks like it's quite a fast process, and I start to wonder why it took me so many weeks to finish something like this. When I see the finished YouTube video about that. Also, I'm really looking forward to painting the dog that's included in one of those figure sets. I've never painted a dog to this day, so I might have to watch some YouTube videos myself to get a better idea how to paint fur and stuff like that. And I hope there isn't too much background noise. I decided to keep my window open so I can experience the nice weather outside here in Germany. It's, it's finally warm again. I'm also really interested in trying to paint a figure in this scale with oil paints in the future, just to see if this will work out, how this will work out. I like to do a lot of oil painting on canvas. And I have to say I like oil paints a bit more than acrylic paints. I think they're a bit easier to use in most cases, at least on canvas. Would be interesting to see how they perform for something like this, and if it's possible to make the paint layers thin enough So yeah, I feel like we're slowly getting somewhere compared to the beginning when he was completely blacked out. And again, at this point, I don't care about any of the details. I just paint over it. And when the uniform is finished, I will black out the details using some scale 75 artist acrylics. So I have a dark base coat again, and then work over that with the right paints. I'm using more or less a combination of wet blending and layering at this point. Getting the lights and shadows in quite rough and then blending everything together in the end. So let me know how you like the results so far. As I said, it's still a bit rough, but I guess we're getting somewhere. So yeah, this is how he looks so far. Already got a lot of work done on his pens. Still have to do a lot of work on his pens, but we started with a completely empty miniature about 2 hours ago. So I think this isn't so bad for this time. Let's do another quick base coat on the guy with the overall. He will receive a camo scheme on his overall. I think it's called Splittermuster. And again, I also start out with quite a dark brown for this guy. And then I will do the base color of the camo scheme all over to establish the shadows and highlights, and then paint in the camo pattern itself with paint that's quite thin, so I can take advantage of the pre-shading a bit. But of course I will do some highlighting on the camo pattern as well. That's like the same technique I used in the last video with for the Leopard crew. And in that small of a scale, it worked without any issues. I will show you my wet palette when I finish this base coat, um, so you can see it in detail a bit more. Just give me about 30 seconds, I guess. That's fine. So for the green uniform I just did um, in this stream, I use like three colors. I start out with a black primer, and then I use those three paints. Um, I started by base coating the miniature in the extra dark green completely. Um, I use the field gray base as a mid-tone, and I use the gray green for my highlights. And what I like to do is, let me show you my wet palette. I mix those paints together. I start out with the extra dark green, then I use some of the dark green with the uniform base. I use some uniform base pure. I mix some of the uniform base with the lightest green, and I also have the lightest green here, but I haven't touched this yet. And what I like to do is I base coat everything quite dark. Then I go in with the the second lightest color and sketch in all the highlights. And then I go back and forth between all my paints and start. It's a yeah, it's a mix of layering and glazing. In the beginning, I do a lot of layering. The paint is a bit thicker, and then I thin it down and glaze over it. And also, those AK interactive paints stay wet for quite a while, so you also get the advantage of doing a little bit of wet blending. In the beginning, that's quite nice. In the end, you have to be a lot more careful, in my opinion, that you don't tear up the paint, you just lay it down. But yeah, using those three paints and mixing them together, even if you don't like to do any blending, if you put those mixed paints next to each other, it already looks quite smooth. And you can see it on his leg here on the front where I did a lot of work. Everything blends together quite nicely without a lot of work. But in the beginning it looks quite rough. So if you take a look at his back or at his arms, the the contrast is quite stark at that moment, but layer by layer it gets blend together a bit more. And I keep my lightest paint for the end, so when I think I'm mostly finished, I use that to do some highlighting. It's more or less an edge highlight, so I do it on the seams on his pants, for example. Um, you can see them a bit, I guess. I put the lightest highlights over there to just make them a bit more pronounced and on the most exposed folds on his clothes and stuff like that. But I keep this for the end so it doesn't overwhelm all the other colors. While I still need to figure out the highlights and shadows and stuff like that. Yeah, those look quite thick at the moment. Um, Let me show you again my wet palette. So I like to dip my brush in water and dab it on a paper towel to thin it down. And you can see it here. This is like the consistency I like to use for my glaze. Um, it's a lot more watery than the other paints look at this point. But this works quite great without running all over the miniature. And I guess the basic way to try if it works is painting it on your thumb and stuff like that and see how it looks on there. And you can see it's hard to see on camera, but I can see a light green shimmer. Let me take a darker paint. That's might be a bit easier. And then I can still see my skin color under that paint, but I see a bit of paint on my hand. And yeah, I got asked before if I use the Vallejo acrylics. I use the AK ones normally. because it's, in my opinion, those are the paints that are most easy, sorry, to thin down. So sometimes you get the problem that the paint starts to separate, and you get like the medium and the water and the pigment on one side separated from each other. But it's quite easy to thin down the AK paints. I don't have to add a lot of water. Most is done by my wet palette. And then it's quite easy to lay them down on the miniature. I have to admit it's um I use those paints I just showed you a lot because I've built a lot of German tanks in the past. And at some point I also had the idea to play a bit of Warhammer 40K. And I started out with the orcs, and since I like German camo schemes, I painted my orcs in those German camo colors as a skin tone. So I did use those a lot and gathered quite a lot of experience with those exact paints. For the figure painting video, after this project is finished, I'm also going to paint a few Russian soldiers. And I'm quite looking forward to that since I haven't done any Russian uniforms up to this day. But I did Russian tanks in the past, and I really like those green paints. So I'm kind of excited to see how that will work for the uniforms. I've also tried to use stuff like glaze medium in the past. It's also sold by Vallejo, aka Interactive, and stuff like that. But I prefer water over glaze medium. I think I like that the paint is a bit thinner using water rather than glaze medium, and um, of course the paint is a lot more translucent using the glaze medium than just paint on its own. But since the consistency doesn't change too much, um, for me it's quite hard to work with the glaze medium because it's still so thick in the paint, or the paint is still so thick. That's actually a good question. I'm not too sure about that. What I understand is that glaze medium is like the medium that's already in the paint. So paint is like pigment, and then there's a medium in the paint to, yeah, I guess it's the fluent where the pigment is dissolved in. And sometimes you get the problem with paint breaking down and separating into the medium and the pigment. And that starts to happen if you when you add too much water to your paint. And the idea is that you use the glaze medium and the paint medium itself that's already in there to keep the consistency and to keep it from separating. You actually can see it on the lightest green paint here a bit. So the pigment is gathered here in the middle, and around here, that stuff is only the medium with a bit of pigment in, and it's already like the right consistency for glazing, but it's still a lot thicker than the paint I would use mixed with water for glazing. And I guess the idea is that it's yeah, the glaze medium will thin your paint, but it will keep it from separating. But honestly, I haven't had too much issues with paint separating on my wet palette while painting. Otherwise, I just mix it together. And when I do glazes, it's for me water works just fine with the AK paints. Um, you also could add a retarder, but retarder just is like yeah keeps your paint from drying. It's quite a nice idea for wet blending sometimes, but I guess often it does more harm than good because it when your paint is wetter, you need to work a lot slower so you don't tear up the layer you just put down again. When I airbrush those acrylic paints, I did that for the leopard tank fu from my last video. Then I actually used some glaze medium. I did use some glaze medium, and I also used like the normal thinner for the AK and active paints because I did a pre-shading there and then glazed over it using my airbrush because I was a bit too lazy. Like I bought all those mediums in the past and because I thought I would need them. But honestly, using a wet palette and a bit of water is, in my opinion, the easiest way for most of this stuff. But I also guess that there are figure painters out there that are way better than me, that will tell you that you can do quite some awesome stuff with all those mediums. And again, let me know in the comments if you would like to see those live streams on a regular basis with me painting figures or something like that. For me, it's quite a nice way to get in touch with you guys on a more direct basis. So if you would like to see this in the future, let me know. Yeah, honestly, it's also a bit easier for me to do something like this in a live stream rather than just a normal video, um, because I can show you everything and you can see the whole process. When I do a normal video, of course, I have to cut a lot of stuff out, and then sometimes it looks rather fast, and of course, I have to skip a few steps so the video doesn't get too long. And I sometimes have the problem myself if I watch other YouTube videos and then there's a cut and something has happened and you don't know what just happened and how to maybe recreate it. So yeah, of course, and the live stream is really helps with that. And I just feel like I did too much light paint in this area on his arm, so I will go back in with some darker paint and place in some dark paint again. Again, it's a lot of back and forth for me until I'm happy. But this is just the best way for me. I haven't read the AK book about it, um, but I've looked at it in the past, and maybe I have to buy it at some point. It's like I think the most important part of figure painting is just starting and trying it out. But yeah, there's a bunch of theory behind that that you can take a look at. And what I really like about the AK paints as well, there are a few sets that also include a small booklet. Like there's one for non-metallic metal in different versions, like steel and gold and stuff like that. And the booklets in there are just a great resource to get special stuff like that done. And I'm also always amazed by seeing the work of really good figure painters that do like contests and stuff. And I really enjoy that. But I have to say it, I always get to a point where I just call a figure done because I'm maybe a bit too impatient to work like a couple hundred hours on one figure. And for me, they're in most cases just an accessory to a larger model. So I try to do the best I can, but I also try to keep it a reasonable amount of work. Also, the best part about figures is that they fit quite easily in an ultrasonic cleaner. So if you mess it up too hard, just chuck them in there with a bit of ISO and the paint comes right off and you can start all over. I've done that a couple of times, I have to admit. So just to set it into perspective a bit, took me about 2 hours to get to this point. Started out with a completely black miniature. In the beginning, I did the base coats for the other figures as well, but that's quite fast, and then started working on this green uniform here, and that's where we at after about 2 hours. I started out by working on his pants at first. Um, I like to get a small section more or less done, and then did a bit more work on the jacket of his uniform to get a better understanding how everything will look together. And now I'm just jumping back and forth, doing a bit of work on his jacket, doing a bit of work on his pants. And so far I'm quite happy. But I guess it will be like another 2 hours before, or maybe three before I can call the uniform done. But that's fine. It's still a lot faster than painting a tank. Yeah, my brush started to separate a bit. I think the most important part for figure painting is using a nice brush. And that's something I learned with oil painting. So the paint is one thing, but the brush is often way more important. So let's see. This is how he looks at this point. As I said, took me about 2 hours to get to this point here. I have to do a bit more work on the green, and I just noticed that I missed one of the mold lines on the inner side of his leg. Um, it's not that big of a problem. I will use a small scalpel blade and scrape that off, and then just paint the shadow over it again. Won't be visible in the end, I guess. So if you look at the left leg here, it's still quite rough. You can see the light areas already painted in and the darker areas, but I haven't done much blending. And then if you look like on the front part of this leg, it's a lot more blended together and a lot more even. Or for the arms of his jacket, I've done a lot more blending. It's still far from perfect. So let me just check how late it is. All right, it's already 7 o'clock here, and I guess I have to get some dinner. So this was a lot of fun for me, and seems like you guys also had a lot of fun. I will keep this miniature away, um, and I won't continue working on it. And I think we will set up another live stream where I started working on this one again, and also on the other figures. There's still this guy that will get the camouflage pattern on his uniform. Have done a lot of work here, and of course the other guy with the more grayish version of that uniform. And of course we still have those guys as well. Let me get them in frame. I wasn't didn't have time to build them yet already, so I have to do a lot of work on those. I did some of the mold line scraping, but as you can see, they are still in pieces. I have to glue them together, prime them, and then we can start painting those guys as well. So 5 crewmen for the upcoming tank, for the Bumblebee, the Hummel. It had 5 crew members, and I think I will use all of those 5. But of course, and that's something I will decide finally when I'm finished building the diorama. And I don't really care about painting a figure, one more figure more or less. If I don't need them for this one, I think I will find a use for them in the future as well. So thank you again all for watching. I hope to see you in the next video. If you happen to be at the Euro Model Expo in Lingen next weekend, um, and you can spot me there, say hi, of course. I think I will have to wear a T-shirt with my name on it or something like that. You can see me, and of course also take a look at the models I will bring with me. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. See you next time.